Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have a really fascinating historical document. It's titled The History of Clothes Dryers. And our mission today is to trace this hidden history for you. We're going to look at how we stopped waiting on the weather and how our impatience literally changed the walls around us.
For centuries, drying clothes relied purely on evaporation via moving air outdoors.
Just the classic clothesline.
Right, exactly. But the moment we began trying to move that process indoors, we triggered this centuries-long engineering puzzle. Because the basic physical principle never changed. Moisture has to absorb into the surrounding air.
Outside, the sun gives you thermal energy, and the wind constantly replaces the humid air with dry air.
Exactly. The wind is doing the heavy lifting.
So to speed up evaporation, people had to introduce artificial heat.
Which meant putting clothing dangerously close to fireplaces and stoves.
Right. And moving from a static rack by a fire to a spinning automated machine is a massive leap.
It is. And the first major mechanical attempt to bridge that gap was, it was quite literal and highly flawed. In 1799, there was this French inventor named Pochon.
Okay.
And he created a, quote, ventilator for drying clothes. It was a cylindrical metal drum pierced with holes. You put the wet clothes inside, positioned the whole thing directly over an open fire, and turned it by hand with a crank. The execution had, let's say, significant room for improvement. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics history, clothes often burned, and they usually emerged smelling strongly of smoke and soot. The reality of hand cranking a drum over a live fire just meant you had zero control over the temperature.
Right.
Still, Pochon established the holy trinity of mechanical drying. And over 2 centuries later, that basic formula is still intact.
That is wild.
Yeah. So he's really best viewed as an early ancestor of the concept, not the definitive inventor.
Which is a perfect pivot to how we actually view the history of this thing. Because if you search online right now for the inventor of the clothes dryer, you are going to see one specific name pop up over and over again.
You really will.
And the internet presents it as this absolute, undisputed fact.
What's fascinating here is how persistent that internet misconception actually is. The name credited everywhere is George T. Sampson. He received a U.S. patent in 1892 for a device literally titled a clothes dryer.
But looking at the actual schematic of that 1892 patent paints a completely different picture.
Yeah.
Sampson didn't invent the tumble dryer at all.
No, not even close.
There is no motor. There is no tumbling drum. There is literally no blower pushing air around. His invention is essentially an elaborate indoor tent pitched over a heat source. Yeah, it was this really ingenious arrangement of folding frames designed to suspend clothing close to a stove. You could position the frames to maximize the radiant heat and then just fold them away.
Right. It was absolutely not the modern tumble dryer.
Right.
And Sampson's story is a vital reminder for you, as you look at history, that technology rarely springs fully formed from a single eureka moment. What we call a clothes dryer developed through many different inventors solving isolated physics problems.
Right. So Sampson solved the heat distribution problem, but the air was still mostly passive. To actually replace the wind, you need forced airflow. Yes. And forcing air mechanically just wasn't viable for a household until electric motors became small enough and cheap enough. And that transition finally happened in the 1930s with a guy named J. Ross Moore.
Yeah, Moore is really the pivotal figure who synthesized these isolated concepts into one machine. In 1930, he developed an electric drying device, and by 1936, he patented a dryer that blew heated air through clothing rotating in a drum. Moore eventually developed gas and electric models, but inventing a functional prototype is very different from manufacturing a consumer appliance at scale.
Oh, for sure.
Financial difficulties forced him to sell his design to the Hamilton Manufacturing Company in 1937. And by 1938, the first commercial electric dryer, based on his design, hit the market.
Okay, so it's finally a real product.
Yeah, between 1938 and 1941, they sold a modest 6,000 units.
Then World War II effectively paused all consumer manufacturing across the U.S. Factories had to retool for the war effort.
Right.
But once the war ended, the pent-up consumer demand and all that industrial capacity unleashed this massive boom. In 1947 alone, Hamilton, GE, and others sold about 41,000 electric dryers and 20,000 gas dryers.
An industry was really solidifying around Moore's fundamental mechanics. But to survive in the post-war consumer market, the machine had to evolve. And this happened through incremental yet vital updates. Like in 1946, they moved the controls to the front of the dryer.
Moving the controls to the front meant they were no longer treating it as industrial utility equipment. They were acknowledging the user experience.
Right, they were treating it as a consumer product.
Yeah.
And that same year, they introduced the cool-down period at the end of the cycle.
Oh, that's huge for wrinkles.
Exactly. It allowed clothes to finish tumbling without active heat, making the garments comfortable to handle. And over the next decades, we got timers and customized temperature controls for delicate fabrics.
But the most impressive technological leap was when the machine stopped blindly following a timer and started paying attention to the clothes. The introduction of moisture-sensing technology completely changed the dynamic.
It did. The dryer could determine the actual physical condition of the fabric. The blower is the true unseen engine of the whole process. Heated air has to be continuously forced through the clothing to absorb the vapor, but that wet air cannot remain inside the drum. The blower forces that air past the internal lint filter and physically pushes it out through the exhaust duct.
We have to look at how skyrocketing consumer adoption completely rewired the American home.
Yeah, the adoption statistics here reveal a staggering societal shift. In the mid-1950s, only about 10% of U.S. households owned a clothes dryer. It was undeniably a luxury item.
Yeah, they were expensive.
Very. At the time, a dryer cost around $230, which the Bureau of Labor Statistics calculated as roughly equivalent to $1,600 in year 2000 currency.
But as manufacturing scaled up, the boom really accelerated. By 1970, roughly 45% of American households owned one.
And it kept growing.
Yeah, by 1997, ownership reached about 78%. And crucially, while the adoption rate was climbing, the inflation-adjusted cost was plummeting. The real price of clothes dryers declined by about 77% from the 50s to 1997.
Even as they gained all those sophisticated sensors, the dryer transitioned from a luxury item to an ordinary expected household fixture, and convenience has a profound way of dictating architecture.
Right, because washers and dryers are used constantly.
Exactly. Homeowners and builders increasingly treated the laundry location as a core component of everyday living. Early on, a dryer was almost always placed against an exterior wall, usually in a basement.
Because it provided the absolute shortest, most direct path outdoors for the exhaust.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Consumer preference eventually overrode the simplicity of a short vent. People stopped wanting their appliances banished to the basement. Homeowners wanted the laundry room centrally located on the main floor.
Or even more conveniently, upstairs near the bedrooms and the closets, because that is where the laundry actually originates.
Right. This architectural shift became so statistically significant that the U.S. Census Bureau actually tracks it.
They do, yeah.
They monitor whether the laundry room is on the first floor, a higher floor, or a basement. It's a measurable shift in how we organize interior spaces. Now, we can't pin this to one specific year, but it was a broad trend in residential construction.
But the logistical consequence of that trend was massive. The most convenient location for the homeowner was rarely the most convenient location for the exhaust system.
Right. The appliance could move deep into the interior of the house, but the outside of the house stayed exactly where it was.
Exactly. Which meant the exhaust system had to stretch to compensate. Moving a dryer away from an exterior wall meant the exhaust duct often had to travel through concealed portions of the building.
Like between floor joists or up through attics.
Yeah, or inside interior walls. The ducting might require multiple 90-degree turns just to navigate around the framing of the house. The termination point on the exterior could end up being 20 or 30 feet away from the actual appliance.
So what began as a simple mechanism, just blowing air through a short metal tube directly outside, transformed into this permanent, complex structural system hidden inside the walls.
The length matters. The number of turns matters. The transition duct, the flapper valve outside, every single component creates resistance against the airflow.
And crucially, lint accumulation drastically alters that fluid dynamics equation over time. So the convergence of all these factors, the longer vents, the hidden ductwork, and unavoidable lint, it basically necessitated the birth of an entirely new profession.
The need to maintain these extended systems didn't emerge overnight. It wasn't triggered by a sudden building code change. It developed organically as a response to the changing landscape of the American home. So specialized professionals stepped into the void. A distinct service industry emerged to focus exclusively on the hidden side of the drying equation.
They developed dedicated diagnostic tools and procedures.
Yeah, and the technical knowledge required to inspect, clear, and evaluate the airflow of these hidden residential exhaust lines. It is the natural culmination of the historical timeline. And as we achieved that ultimate mechanical convenience, we reorganized our living spaces around it. As we pushed our laundry rooms deeper into our homes, the exhaust infrastructure had to stretch to meet the outdoors.
Right.
We didn't simply go from clotheslines to clothes dryers. As the appliance and the homes around it evolved, we ultimately went from clotheslines to long vent lines.
That perfectly sums it up. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.